Well, for more on the latest developments in the China-US trade and tariffs, I'm joined by Mark Lehnardt. He's a counsel at Baker Hostetler. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, good evening.
So it did seem as though US-China talks were progressing nicely based on what we saw, or at least the trade war was put on hold. And then now we're back to having this new round of proposals on tariffs. And this is coming as US Commerce Secretary Wilbur is heading to China. What are your thoughts on this and how that might set the tone for this trip?
Well, you know, President Trump is, he's not one to be pinned down in any position, and he's willing to change his positions all the time. I think he likes to keep people off balance so that they don't know what's coming, and he thinks he has a superior hand in negotiation. But, you know, as has been said earlier, I think trade partners are growing weary of this activity. So, you know, we'll see. China hasn't taken well to attempts to being bullied into a trade position, and I don't think it'll go over well this time either.
So with the US trade delegation having this two-pronged approach, on the one side, you think things are kind of going well, and then all of a sudden you get this surprise. How does this sort of tactic either hurt or help in the negotiations?
Well, I think it certainly hurts negotiations. You need to be able to rely on what the opposing party says in a negotiation. But I think also, you know, you look at what is the Trump administration doing to distract, and what are they trying to distract you from? You know, here we've got, these are Section 301 duties, and this is something that the EU took the US to court over at the WTO in the late 90s. The U.S. prevailed, but it was only because the U.S. gave assurances that it would only be used in conjunction with the outcome of a WTO proceeding. So they've violated that already. And now the U.S. is also using the 232 national security investigations, and people are generally afraid to challenge that at the WTO, but it's undermining our global trade system.
Now, it's been a while since we've seen an administration use this so much, especially when it comes to using it as a negotiation tactic to other issues. We know that the U.S. has been accused of using tariffs as a way of putting pressure on countries regarding issues like NAFTA and EU trade imbalances, which is where we saw perhaps these auto parts being targeted by tariffs. Who wins and who loses with this sort of approach?
Well, you know, I think as the economy has evolved over the several decades, these tools are a little outdated. Businesses are so connected globally that, you know, what used to hurt foreign companies only now hurts U.S. companies just as much. You look at, you know, Ford and Chrysler and Dodge, and they're building cars overseas and bringing them to the U.S. So now who gets hurt most when, you know, Toyota and BMW and others are making cars in the U.S., for example? The interconnected global trading system is not what it used to be, and these are outdated tools that are just harming everybody, I think. And
we did see that the White House's statement showed that the 301 investigation really is targeting China's efforts to upgrade its manufacturing and high-tech sectors with its Made in China 2025 plan. How should China and Chinese companies respond, being that these are still proposals at this point, but they're clearly being shown what the target is?
Right, well, it's tough, right? I mean, they have their own goals with the China 2025, and the U.S. has its goals. You know, the Trump administration won't be around forever. I think many people hope that our trading partners will be patient until there's a change in philosophy, anyway, in the White House. And I think that's sort of the approach that has to be taken. Patience until there's a favorable climate.
Now, we've seen a lot of sort of reactions from the Trump administration. For example, a lot of people were wondering if we're seeing this harder line now because of the backlash that he got from some people in his own party over his treatment of ZTE. What are your thoughts, especially being in an election year, as to whether this is more about saving face at home versus actually doing what he says he wants to do, which is putting American jobs first? Right.
There are certain contradictions here that just don't make a lot of sense with ZTE. You know, and there are also people in the administration that have his ears that have been anti-China and anti-trade for decades. You know, I think ZTE was a surprise for just about everybody, and so you're right. You know, hitting back where he was pulling back before makes a little bit of political sense. You satisfy some people, and I think Senator Schumer said he liked that 301 was going forward, but wanted to see more.
Now, we know that both China and the U.S. have taken their objections to the World Trade Organization. Where do they stand with their response? There's a lot of different deadlines, a lot of moving parts, but where does the WTO stand on this right now?
Well, the biggest difficulty there is the appellate body and the panelists that are appointed there. There are only 4 right now, and pretty soon one will leave, and then there'll only be 3, which is the minimum number. The U.S. today refused to allow an appointment to go forward, and or several appointments to go forward. And if they continue to stonewall, then the WTO dispute system falls apart. I'm sure that the U.S. would say if, there's 2 levels. There's the panel and then the appellate body. And if there's a panel decision that comes out and the U.S. wants to appeal because they don't like it, I'm sure they'll say, well, the appellate body can't or hasn't spoken on this, so we don't consider the panel to be binding. Right?
So certainly another new wrinkle to add into things.
Undermining the global trade system.
All right, well, thank you so much for your insights. Mark Lehnardt, counsel at Baker Hostetler.